Walk into any Amish home in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, and the first thing that hits you is the smell. Not food cooking, something older than that. Something like earth and vinegar and smoke layered together in the walls of a house that has been feeding itself for 200 years without asking anyone for permission. There is a woman named Barbara Byler who lives 12 miles outside of Strasburg. She has 9 children. Her pantry runs the length of the back wall, floor to ceiling, shelf after shelf, and every single jar on those shelves was filled by her own hands. Pickled beets, fermented cabbage, smoked pork shoulder sealed in lard, apple butter, dried beans in cloth bags, cornmeal ground from last year's harvest. The root cellar underneath her house holds potatoes, carrots, turnips, and winter squash in enough quantity to feed that family from November through April without stepping outside. She has not been inside a grocery store in 11 years, and she does not plan to start. What Barbara knows, what every family in her community knows, was common knowledge across America less than 80 years ago. It was taught in homes, passed from mother to daughter, practiced on farms from Virginia to Ohio to the flat plains of Indiana. Then something happened, and the knowledge got buried so completely that most people alive today have never heard a single word of it. But there is something that nobody is talking about when it comes to this story, and it changes everything about the way you understand the food system you live inside right now. The Amish did not keep this knowledge because they were stubborn. They kept it because they watched what happened to everyone else and decided, quietly and without fanfare, to stay exactly where they were. Here is what they know that you were never taught. The centerpiece of the Amish food system is the root cellar. Not a pantry, not a refrigerator. A room dug into the earth, usually 6 to 8 feet below ground level, where the temperature holds naturally between 32 and 45 degrees Fahrenheit year-round without a single dollar of electricity. Every Amish farmstead has one. They have had them for 200 years. The design has not changed because it has never needed to. The earth itself is the refrigerator, and it costs nothing to run. Inside that cellar, a family stores what would look to a modern eye like a small grocery store. Root vegetables stay fresh for 5 to 7 months in the right conditions, packed loosely in wooden crates, separated by layers of sand or sawdust to prevent moisture transfer. Apples keep from October through March. Potatoes, cured properly after harvest, last from September to the following summer. Onions braided and hung from the ceiling beams last even longer. Winter squash, cured in warm air for 10 days after harvest to harden the skin, sits on the cellar shelves for 4 to 6 months without a single day of refrigeration. The modern food system made root cellars disappear on purpose. In the 1950s, when refrigerator manufacturers began pushing mass-market units across the country, the pitch was simple: convenience. You no longer needed to manage a cellar. You no longer needed to think about harvest timing or curing temperatures or the difference between a potato that will store and one that will not. The refrigerator would handle all of it. What the pitch left out was that a refrigerator costs money every single month to run, requires purchased food to fill it, and creates a dependency on the grocery store that, once established, almost nobody ever breaks. The Amish never broke with the cellar system, and what they preserved was not just food, it was freedom. But the root cellar is only the beginning. What no one tells you, what the food industry has worked very hard to make sure you never think about, is that most of the preservation techniques the Amish use require almost nothing. No electricity, no special equipment, no preservatives purchased from anyone. The techniques themselves are the technology, and they are as reliable today as they were in 1820. Lacto-fermentation is the oldest and most powerful of them. Every Amish kitchen has a crock somewhere, usually ceramic, thick-walled, set in a cool corner of the kitchen or moved to the cellar once packed. Into that crock goes cabbage, shredded fine and salted. The salt draws water from the plant cells and creates a brine. In that brine, naturally occurring bacteria on the surface of the cabbage, lactobacillus, the same genus that lives in your gut, begin converting sugars into lactic acid. The lactic acid drops the pH of the brine. The low pH kills pathogenic bacteria. The good bacteria survive. The result, after 7 to 14 days, is sauerkraut that will last in a cool cellar for over a year. No vinegar added, no heat treatment, no sealed vacuum bags. Just salt, thyme, and the microbes that have been on the surface of cabbage since before humans existed. This same process works on cucumbers, carrots, beets, green beans, garlic, and dozens of other vegetables. A single 50-pound bag of cabbage, bought in bulk at harvest time for a few dollars, becomes enough sauerkraut to last a family through winter. The Amish do not think of this as a food preservation technique. They think of it as cooking. It is embedded in the rhythm of the year, something that happens in October when the cabbage comes in, the same way it happened in October 150 years ago. Industrial food companies know exactly what lacto-fermentation is. They know it produces food with a shelf life that no refrigerated product can match. They know it requires no input costs beyond salt. And they have spent decades replacing it in the American diet with pasteurized, vinegar-pickled products that require constant refrigeration, go bad within weeks of opening, and deliver none of the probiotic benefit of the real thing. The shift was not an accident. It was a business decision. A product that lasts a year without refrigeration and costs almost nothing to make does not generate recurring revenue. A jar of shelf-stable store pickles that costs $3 and goes bad in 3 weeks does. But there is something else buried even deeper in this story, and almost nobody is talking about it. The Amish relationship to meat preservation is another system that has been systematically removed from public knowledge. In Holmes County, Ohio, the largest Amish settlement in the world, every fall is marked by Butchering Day. Hogs raised over the summer are processed in a single community effort, and nothing is wasted. The hams go into salt for 6 weeks, packed in coarse salt with brown sugar and a touch of saltpeter, then hung in the smokehouse for 3 to 4 weeks over hickory or applewood smoke. The resulting ham will hang in a cool cellar or outbuilding for 12 months without spoiling. It requires nothing after the initial process. You cut what you need, wrap the rest, and the preservation continues on its own. Bacon is done the same way, dry cured with salt and sugar, cold smoked, hung to age. Pork lard, rendered from the fat, becomes both a cooking medium and a preservation medium. Ground pork mixed with sage and pepper becomes sausage, stuffed into natural casings, smoked, and then submerged completely in rendered lard inside a ceramic crock. In that lard, with no air contact and the natural antimicrobial properties of the saturated fat, the sausage will stay safe and edible for 6 months without refrigeration. This technique, called confit in French, was practiced for centuries across Europe and America. The Amish never stopped using it. Most Americans alive today have never heard of it. What the meatpacking industry did beginning in earnest in the mid-20th century was to industrialize processing and then convince the public that home preservation was dangerous. The messaging was relentless. Home-cured meat was portrayed as a vector for botulism and foodborne illness. The truth was more specific. Improperly done, low-acid preservation in sealed jars carried risk, but salt curing and smoking done correctly do not. They never have. The Amish have been doing it for 200 years without incident. But by the time the industry had finished its campaign, the idea of curing meat at home had become, in the American mind, vaguely frightening, which is exactly where the meatpacking industry wanted it. There is a detail about the Amish pantry system that most people miss when they first learn about it. The fermentation and the root cellar and the curing are not separate practices. They work together as a single system, timed to the calendar of the growing season. July is for putting up tomatoes canned in water bath canners, using nothing but the acid in the tomatoes themselves as the preservative. August is for corn dried on the cob and ground in the fall, or cut from the cob and dried in the sun for days before storage in cloth bags. September is the month that separates the people who know from the people who do not, the curing month. Meat goes into salt, winter squash goes into the warm barn to cure its skin. Potatoes get dug and sorted, the ones with any damage eaten immediately. The unblemished ones set aside in wooden crates for the cellar. October is for cabbage, for root vegetables, for the last of the apple harvest. By November, the work is done. The cellar is full, the crocks are bubbling, the smokehouse has done its job. And for the next 5 months, that family feeds itself from what their land produced and their hands preserved. The rhythm itself is the system. Each task is timed, not by convenience, but by biology, by the moment when a vegetable is at its peak sugar content for fermentation, by the temperature window when smoke penetrates meat most effectively, by the outdoor cold that drops the cellar temperature to the ideal range for long-term storage. The Amish learned this timing from their parents, who learned it from their parents, stretching back through generations to the communities of Germany and Switzerland from which they came. The grocery store replaced this rhythm with something that has no rhythm at all, a warehouse that is always open, always full, always prepared to supply any food at any time of year, regardless of whether that food has any business being available in that month. The convenience was real. The cost in dependency, in expense, in the gradual loss of the knowledge itself was never shown on the price tag. The seed system is where the deepest suppression happened, and it is the part of this story that most people find hardest to believe when they first hear it. Every crop the Amish grow, they grow from seed they save themselves. Every year, from every variety they plant, they select the strongest, healthiest specimens, the ones that produce the best fruit, resisted disease most effectively, tolerated drought or wet conditions better than their neighbors, and they save the seed from those plants to plant the following spring. This is called seed saving, and it is how all of agriculture worked for 10,000 years. The seeds the Amish save are called open-pollinated varieties. When you plant them and let them mature and go to seed, the seed you collect will grow plants that are true to the parent, the same variety, the same characteristics, passed down reliably generation after generation. They are, in the truest sense, living inheritance. An Amish family in Lancaster County may be planting the same tomato variety their great-grandparents brought over from Switzerland in 1840. In the 1970s, a handful of agricultural corporations began developing and patenting hybrid seed varieties. Hybrids produced under controlled conditions by crossing two carefully selected parent lines, and the resulting seed grew plants with specific desired traits, high yield, uniform appearance, simultaneous ripening for mechanical harvest. They were designed for industrial agriculture, but there was a built-in feature that the companies never advertised in plain terms. The seeds produced by hybrid plants, if saved and replanted, did not breed true. They reverted to the parent lines or produced unpredictable offspring. To get the same hybrid the next year, the farmer had to buy seed again, every year, from the same company. By the 1980s, hybrid varieties dominated commercial seed catalogs. By the 1990s, many open-pollinated varieties had disappeared from commercial availability entirely. By 2000, a small number of corporations, Monsanto chief among them, now owned by Bayer, controlled the intellectual property on the majority of commercial vegetable and grain seeds sold in the United States. Farmers who attempted to save seed from patented varieties faced legal action. The system of living, self-renewing seed that had sustained agriculture for millennia had been replaced, within 50 years, with a system that required farmers to purchase seed from a corporation every single season. The Amish kept their seeds. They traded them at church fairs, passed them between communities, stored them in paper envelopes in cool, dry cellars, and maintained the living library that the rest of American agriculture had surrendered. And what they preserved has become, in recent years, the subject of frantic attention from seed preservation organizations who are trying to document and protect exactly what the Amish never stopped doing. The raw dairy system is the last major piece of the Amish food independence, and it is the one the government fought hardest against. An Amish cow produces milk. The milk goes directly from the cow to the household raw, unprocessed, full of the enzymes, beneficial bacteria, and cream that pasteurization and homogenization strip away. From that milk, the Amish make butter, cultured with naturally occurring cream bacteria into a product that lasts for weeks at cellar temperature without any added preservatives. They make hard cheese aged for months in the cellar, cheddar-style wheels coated in lard to seal the rind, blue-veined wheels pressed and aged in cloth. They make fresh cheese, farmer's cheese, quark pressed in cloth and eaten within a week. They make yogurt cultured at warm room temperature overnight and stored in the cellar. The yield from a single dairy cow, managed this way, covers the household's dairy needs entirely, with surplus to trade. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration banned the interstate sale of raw milk in 1987. 22 states have since banned its sale or distribution even within state lines. The public health rationale is well documented. Raw milk can carry pathogens, E. coli, salmonella, listeria, if the source cow is sick or the milk is mishandled. The industry rationale is less publicized. The commercial dairy industry, built on pasteurization and homogenization, cannot compete economically with a household or small farm selling raw milk directly. A raw milk dairy operation requires no pasteurization equipment, no homogenization equipment, and no industrial-scale infrastructure. The overhead is a fraction of commercial dairy. The product, to the people who seek it out, commands a premium price. Banning it removed a competitor that would otherwise be very difficult to eliminate. The Amish fought these laws through the courts for decades. They lost most of those fights. But within their communities, on their own land, they kept doing what they had always done. And the knowledge of how to do it, how to culture, how to press, how to age, how to store, stayed alive. What you are looking at when you look at an Amish community is a complete food system. One that produces everything a family needs from the land it sits on, processes and preserves that food using techniques that cost almost nothing, and stores it in ways that require no ongoing electrical or commercial infrastructure. It is not primitive, it is precise. The root cellar is engineered, the fermentation timing is calibrated, the seed selection is deliberate genetic stewardship carried out across generations. Every piece of it was developed through direct experience and refined through hundreds of years of iteration. The reason most Americans do not know any of this is not ignorance. It is that the system that replaced it, the grocery store, the refrigerator, the commercial seed catalog, the pasteurized dairy aisle, was actively sold to the American public as progress. And every part of that system generates revenue for someone. The cellar does not. The fermentation crock does not. The saved seed envelope does not. The raw milk from your own cow does not. So the people who profit from the alternative had every reason to make the old way look outdated, difficult, or dangerous. And they succeeded. For about 60 years, they succeeded completely. The thing is, and this is what the Amish have understood all along, none of this knowledge actually went away. It was preserved in exactly the communities that had the most reason to hold on to it. The techniques are not complicated. The root cellar can be dug by one person in a weekend with rented equipment. Lacto-fermentation requires a crock, salt, and a vegetable. Seed saving requires patience and a paper envelope. Dry curing requires salt, time, and a cool place. None of it demands expertise you cannot develop. None of it costs what you think. The Amish have never bought groceries because they never needed to. And the reason they never needed to is that they kept doing what everyone else was convinced to stop. Every system you learned in this video is documented and practical. The root cellar dimensions, the lacto-fermentation ratios, the seed selection criteria, the dry cure ratios for pork preservation, none of it is guesswork. It is knowledge that was refined over centuries and that the Amish have kept intact while the rest of the food system moved in a direction designed to make you dependent and spending. You do not have to live on a farmstead in Lancaster County to apply any of this. A root cellar can be adapted to a corner of a basement with basic insulation modifications. Lacto-fermentation works in any kitchen in any city. Seed saving starts with 1 tomato. The first step is simply knowing that these systems exist, that they are real, that they are documented, and that the reason you never heard about them is not because they do not work. It is because they work too well. The Amish figured that out 200 years ago, and they have been quietly proving it every single day since. There is one more thing worth saying before the end of this video, and it is the thing that the Amish themselves would most likely point to if you ask them to explain how they have maintained this system across 2 centuries of industrialization. The system works because it is shared. The root cellar on one farmstead stores the same vegetables as the root cellar on the farmstead 3 miles down the road. The sauerkraut crock in one kitchen uses the same technique as the crock in every kitchen in the district. When a family runs short of something, a particular seed variety that did not make it through a bad spring, a cut of meat they did not have time to cure before butchering day, a neighbor has it. When a young couple sets up their first household, the older women of the community walk them through the fermentation calendar. When a man builds a new cellar, his neighbors help him frame it. The knowledge moves laterally through the community, constantly reinforced, never allowed to go dormant in a single household and disappear when that household is gone. That lateral movement of knowledge is something the industrial food system cannot replicate and cannot compete with. A corporation can sell you a product. It cannot give you the network of people who know how to grow, preserve, and store food without it. If you want the complete system, the exact cellar dimensions, the specific salt ratios for every preservation technique, the seed-saving calendar by crop, and the full dairy protocols the Amish use, everything is in the guide linked below. Every step, every measurement, every method that the food industry spent decades making sure you would never find in one place. Subscribe if you want to know what they stopped teaching, because there is more, a lot more.